super stoked on how good my bike is feeling. How about you? I know you don't want to go through the water, but
I do appreciate the thoughtfulness. Check out that Ranger.
What's up, guys? Here we are at Corsa Moto Works with Kevin, the suspension specialist, and we're gonna just set up Heather's suspension on our GSXR750. Finally, after how many years of ownership?
About 4.
About 4. All right, so
ideally, you should do that suspension setup right when you get the bike. these are sprung for one rider weight from the factory, and you're being 145 pounds, you're 180 pounds. Those two setups are completely different.
Yep.
You guys essentially have the same bike, so that setup should be done right away, and it's not something they do at the dealership. So go ahead and jump on. We'll do some initial measurements. Normal riding position, your feet on the pegs there, and hands on the bars. We'll talk about ergonomics here in a second. We'll just do the initial measurements here.
Were you 180 with gear?
I was probably like 186.
I was gonna say he used my with gear weight and you're non-weight.
Yeah. A little unfair on your side.
Right? Still accurate. That's as far as the bike.
Bars there for me. Oh, is that guy? We want you taking up the first 25 to 30% of the suspension travel. So with the wheel off the ground, you have 130 millimeters of tube showing, and that number would be somewhere between 32.5 to 39, depending on the setup we want. We're going for like a 50-50 setup. How aggressive on the street are you on like a scale of 1 to 10? 1 to 10 being like new, and 10 being street rust.
I'd say about a 7.
7? So generally on these big piston forks, I'm never scared to use this 40 number. And part of what we're doing when we're setting the spring preload is we're setting our initial geometry. Now, Chris's bike is set up a little bit different because these fork tubes are at the stock position, which is level with the upper triple tree. Chris's bike, we actually dropped it. So we may actually shoot for a lower number in the front to help set that initial geometry, and that will help us get that bike to turn in a little bit easier. So your numbers are 39 for your sag in the front, which you're at that 30% number, and 35.5 in the rear, which is the same. So you can go ahead and jump off. We'll make a couple of adjustments. We'll throw you back on and remeasure.
Alright. Yep. Nice to be back on the bike.
Yeah,
A
right?
long time.
Take just a little bit out. somewhat small changes in the front. I went from 39, I dropped it just a little bit in the front down to that 40 number. And again, we're setting chassis geometry. We're not talking about making it softer or stiffer when we're doing spring preload, and that's all we're talking about right now. Before you were at 35.5 in the rear, and actually raised the rear end up, so now we're at 31 millimeters of sag, and that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to give the bike somewhat of a forward pitch, and that will help put a little bit more weight on the front tire and help the bike turn in. We want a nice, easy turn in. We don't want to have to put too much pressure into the bars to get it to turn. So that's good there. Now we'll talk about the hydraulics. I don't know if you want to get out of your suit real quick, or if you just want to go ahead and just start talking about it. Okay, so we'll talk about the rear first. You have compression and rebound adjustments on here. Rebound, also known as tension, in the front. Basically, we're just going to bounce the bike and we're just going to kind of see how it reacts. In the case of the high speed, I can't really simulate high speed compression just by pushing on the bike. We're talking about high speed wheel movements, so I can't really push the bike down fast enough to simulate a pop hole. So compression is felt at the top of the stroke because the spring does most of that compression work, so the compression valve is actually pretty small. The rebound is really where the money's at. The rebound is where 90% of your problems are. You're talking about the feeling of comfort or the feeling of control. Rebound is the adjustment that you want to play with. So on this one, you can almost see how it comes back just a little bit on the slow side, that last little bit of the stroke. So rebound adjuster is actually on the bottom of the shock, way down here. Flat blade screwdriver. Let's see where you're at. Half, 1, 1.5, 2, 2.5. And just a skosh more. We'll call it 2 3/4. And then these adjustments, your zero is always fully closed. So it's like the faucet on the outside of the harness. You go all the way clockwise, no flow. Right? All the way counterclockwise, free flow, no resistance. Now with the valve all the way closed, it comes back really slow. Right? This kind of gives us an idea of the range. If we had that valve all the way closed and it was still bouncing away, that would be an indication that you actually need to service your shock. But in this case, not a whole lot of miles on the bike, it's still in pretty good shape. Now if we go to the other side and we open that valve all the way up, it should come back a lot faster. Comes back almost immediately.
Yeah.
Right? So again, talking about the feeling of comfort, that's going to be on the clockwise side. You want to let it flow, let it move around. If you want that feeling of control, you got to go clockwise. Now there is a balance, because if you go too far, you get what's called packing. And packing will make it seem like it's really harsh, and you would think, oh, it's too much compression. It's actually not the case, because the rebound is not letting the shock ever come back to full extension, so you get lower and lower and lower in the stroke. You're basically bottoming the thing out because it's never able to come back to the top. So basically want it to go down, come up, and it's ready for the next bump. Right? 2 3/4. You'd be surprised what a 1/4 of a turn will do on these.
That's what you were saying earlier. It would just even be an 1/8 of a turn if you're trying to make an adjustment.
Yeah.
Just like we were doing it.
Yeah. Today we're gonna play with all of the adjustments, right? But if you wanted to go and fine tune, you would really only change one thing at a time. That way, if it got worse, you know that you went the wrong way or you played with the wrong adjustment. So, yeah. In this particular case, we're just trying to give you a platform or a baseline. And then as you go back to the track, or when you go to the mountains, or if you want to start commuting on the bike or something like that, we can kind of tailor it more towards your level. So turn that down a little bit. Now we're talking about the compression side. Compression again is felt from the top of the stroke. See where we're at. 2 1/4 turns. Sounds like compression all the way in. See, it's a lot harder to push down on that rear end. Okay, and then the high-speed compression is the 12mm nut. It's usually on the newer style Gixxers. Some of the older ones don't have the high-speed compression. Not all shops do. But in this case, the 12mm nut on the outside, it's all in turns, so you count where you're at. 0 is always closed. That's half, 1, 1.5, 2, 2.5, 3, just over 3, and that's your 0. Okay, so we'll mark that down real quick. 3 turns on the high-speed compression. And then let's see what our total range is. Half, 1, 1.5, 2, 2.5, 3, 3.5, 4, 4.5, 5. About 5 turns total, right? Go back to 0. And set this one halfway through the stroke, halfway through its adjustment range, I should say, which is a pretty good starting point. Half, 1, 1.5, 2, 2. Okay, so that is for the rear. Now we'll move on to the front. Same kind of idea. The compression is felt at the top of the stroke because you're not getting into the full bulk of the spring yet. You can actually feel what that valving is doing. And again, these are probably at stock numbers for the most part. Feels like it's pretty good, actually. We noticed that when we rolled it in, you can really feel it. So if we push through the stroke and we watch how the bike comes back, we're talking about the rebound side now, that we go down through the stroke, we come back up and just kind of set back on top. It's almost ready for the next bump. We don't want it to stop on the way back. We don't want it to do a second or third bounce. We just kind of want to be ready for the next bump. All right, so we'll go ahead and bounce now. Actually feels pretty good. Let's just see where we're at as far as the ranges are concerned. Half, 1, 1.5, 2, 2.5, 3, 3.5. Almost 4. Call that 3 3/4. You always want to make sure that these are the same on both sides. So half, 1, 1.5, 2, 2.5, 3, 3.5, 3 3/4. Good there. 1, 1.5, 2, 3.5, 3.5, 4, 4.5, 5, 5.5, 6. You have 6 turns total. So just to kind of give you the comparison, if I take all of the rebound out, you'll see that we turn into a hoopty rider and we get a second or third bounce out.
Yeah.
Too quick. Conversely, if you close it all the way, it'll probably stop on its way back. This just kind of gives us an idea of how good the oil in the forks is.
Okay.
If we close that rebound all the way and it's still super bouncy, it's time to service the forks. Nope. Comes back, stops at the top. So that's too slow for the setup that we're doing. 1, 1.5, 2, 2.5, 3. Let's try 3.5. 1, 2, 1.5, 3, 3.5. See how it's kind of just coming up, setting back on top, it's ready for the next bump. Let me just check the compression one more time. Compression's almost more of a fine tune for what I do. Half, 1, half, 2, half, 3, half, 4, 5. That's pretty far out. Half, 1, half, 2, half, 3, half, 4, half, 5. Cool. stroke. See how much quicker it moves. Very little input. 8.5 turns total. Somewhere halfway through the range is generally a good starting point. Especially if the bike is used. You bought it from somebody else, they may have messed with these. Sometimes they're, one's at this many turns, that many turns on this side. So you always want to have them the same on both sides. Okay, so this is our final setting. A little stiffer than what it was.
Yes, we're gonna add the fancy zip tie.
It's not a zip tie. This
Oh,
is a very precision piece of machinery that we use, or tool that we use. It's called a fork-legged indicator. And this is information for me and for you to see how much of the stroke we're actually using. Generally speaking, you want to use anywhere from 60 to 90% of your suspension travel. This zip tie is way up here. We know it's way too stiff. We have a spring rate problem. There's way too much compression. Oil level's too high. Something like that. Conversely, if it's all the way smacked against the bottom, which true bottom out, you'll always have a little bit of chrome tube showing, generally 5 to 7 millimeters from the bottom. We know that that would be too soft. Either we need to add spring, we need to add compression to slow this down. So generally, I can push about halfway through the stroke just by hand. And when we're talking about street or track, I want you using anywhere from 60 to 90% of this travel. This dampening is actually based on velocity. So spring rate is the weight of you and the weight of the bike, but the dampening, the actual hydraulic adjustments, is based on the velocity at which it's going through that stroke. So that's where we can get into, if we're riding a little bit high on the track and it feels harsh, we know we have a compression issue, or rebounds too slow, or what have you. And we can play with each one of those adjusters individually, and we can dial that back in. We don't want you bottoming out either, because bottoming out is where we start losing front ends. Because we're just hitting the bottom of the stroke, and now you're just taking it out on the carcass of the tire, and the tire can't do it. You just lose that front end. So every time you ride, before you go out, just go ahead and reset your zip tie. Come to the gas station. Yeah, it's about 85%. It's about right. Sounds good to me. Go ahead and reset it. Now, if you mousetrap a wheelie or something like that, yeah, of course the zip tie is going to go really low. It's not really great information. So what we're looking for is when you're at your full braking potential, right? Smooth application of the brakes, getting into the real weight transfers of this bike in a track scenario. You want to see that zip tie hitting that 90% mark most of the time. And if it's not, we need to make those adjustments. So on this last bounce, I'm going to bounce the whole bike at the same time, and I want to make sure the front and rear go up and down at the same rate. If the rear bounces more than the front, or vice versa, that's an issue, and we need to resolve that. It was pretty even when we came in. Let's make sure we're still even. Okay, looks pretty good. It looked like it went up and down at the same rate. So, any other questions, comments, concerns about anything you changed? Or?
No concerns. I'm just excited to ride it. Test it out.
Again, if rebound or tension, that's going to be that feeling of control or that feeling of comfort. If you were riding around in the street, it's a little bit too harsh. Start by taking just a little bit of rebound out, or tension in this case, and that usually is what's going to make that ride seem a little bit smoother. Rebound's also where 90% of your problems are. So if you have a tire wear issue, or if you're having rear ends making weird movements in the middle of the turn, that sort of thing, almost 90% of the time, those problems are going to be on the rebound side.
Okay.
So, cool. You guys are going to the mountains, huh?
Yeah.
Alright guys, we got the suspension done from Corsa Moto Works. Kevin did all of our suspension work. Super stoked on how good my bike is feeling. How about you?
Same.
Same?
Yeah, it feels really good.
Can you tell any difference like in the tip in or anything like that?
It feels like it just wants to turn it. Like you said, all I have to do is think, turn, tip.
Think, turn, tip.
Think.
Think,
And it happens.
and then it happens.
Yep.
I like it.
I mean, I will say, that is one of the things I love about this specific bike is going from the Ninja 650 to this. This one does really tip in a lot easier. The ergonomics of this bike were already really nice, but it's even better. It's now above average.
Yeah, yeah.
So, and it's more accounting for my body weight and my riding style. So I'm just really, really excited to get this bike to the mountains and then especially the track and see the difference there.
That's where it's really gonna shine.
Yes.
Because on the street, it's one of those things that like you can get a feel for it, and you can kind of look at your tires, how they're wearing and everything. But I mean, we've only got like, I don't know, 30-40 miles on these tires. They're practically brand new. But the mountains are gonna tell a lot more about it. But the track is really where it's gonna shine. So. Yeah, just wanted to say big thank you to Kevin and all the guys at Corsa Moto Works.
Thank you so much.
You guys were awesome. Like, the hospitality was through the roof. And here we are. Finally have our suspension dialed in the right way it should be. So, thanks for watching, guys.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you, Kevin. We'll see you in the next one. Peace and ride safe.
Peace out, guys. Ride safe.